So you're thinking about using Apple HomeKit to turn your dumb home into a smart home. Where do you start? That's what I'm going to help you with. What is Apple HomeKit exactly? In short, it's a smart home platform created and maintained by Apple and allows you to turn your home, like as I said, from a dumb home into a smart home. And one of the standout features for HomeKit is that everything is wireless. Now, my parents bought a smart home from in the early 2000s and everything's wired. It is just an absolute mess to troubleshoot and there's no upgradability. So everything just seems archaic now. But with Apple HomeKit devices, everything is wireless. It's either through your Bluetooth connection or through Wi-Fi. In the next few minutes, I'm going to talk about what HomeKit actually is, how to implement HomeKit, and to give you a couple of examples of how I've been using HomeKit in my own home. So HomeKit is basically another walled garden product from Apple where it provides a bunch of code that HomeKit developers use in their apps and hardware products. Now, I'm a big fan of this uniformity because it allows me to easily set up HomeKit devices as I only have to do it once, and it shows up across all my devices. You can even add people to use these devices, so it's just not constrained to your family sharing. Just make sure that you buy HomeKit labeled devices. One of the neat things with HomeKit is that you can use Siri to control them. Now, I'm still kind of on the fence about talking to my device when I'm just by myself, but being able to tell Siri to turn off all my basement lights rather than going to every lamp and powering it off manually has been very helpful. As I mentioned earlier, HomeKit uses both Wi-Fi and Bluetooth to control the devices. So if you got spotty Wi-Fi, like I do in this one bedroom, you can definitely get a Bluetooth version of a product, well, if it exists. So from my perspective, there's three ways you can use HomeKit. Just, basically straight out of the box. You can run it through an iPad or you can run it through an Apple TV. Now, if you were to use it straight out of the box, it works, everything sets up very, very easily, but the biggest downside is that you can't control anything remotely. You have to be on your home network in order for you to access all those devices. So if you're living, say, like in an apartment or a condo building where you don't really need to trick people into thinking that you're home, this might work out for you. I will add that you can buy certain accessories like this iHome ISP8 that can be accessed remotely through iHome services rather than through HomeKit, though I'm not a big fan of the implementation, mostly because I just don't like signing up with a lot of different services. Now, if you want to access your HomeKit accessories outside of your home network, then you definitely need to either use an iPad or use an Apple TV. And this is probably going to be very useful for people who decide to invest in their some video stuff. So that's you could probably see it. That little silver container, that's a D-Link Omna camera. So being able to view what is going on in my living room remotely outside of my home network is handy. So I definitely need to use either an Apple TV or an iPad. Now, I'm personally not a big fan of using the iPad as the control center for all my HomeKit stuff, mostly because the moment that I leave an iPad at home or the moment I take it out of the home network, I can't access anything anymore. I can't imagine a family with kids who use an iPad as an entertainment device to be also using the iPad as a HomeKit command center. But this is almost a moot point if you have an iPad and you don't have an Apple TV and you don't want to spend any more money. The last way to access everything remotely is through an Apple TV, and using an Apple TV ensures that you always have access to your HomeKit accessories as long as you have Wi-Fi. You generally don't have to worry about keeping tabs on your Apple TV since, that's not a device that you would carry around, I don't think. So that's really the biggest difference is that, well, this is going to be persistent unless you move your Apple TV around a lot, and this one might not be as persistent, especially if you take your iPad to work and you decide to leave it there, then you're kind of screwed in terms of accessing everything in your house remotely. I personally would go with the Apple TV route because it just seems simpler. But again, it's a moot point. If you have an Apple TV and you don't have an iPad, you're going to use your Apple TV, and if you have an iPad and don't have an Apple TV, then you're going to use the iPad. So last part of this video, I am going to talk about how I've been using smart plugs in my own home. For the first example, I've been using a CoolGeek smart plug in my office to minimize the amount of energy wasted, basically eliminating the phantom power that my printer, all the devices that I plug in the monitors, as well as the laptop draw every single night. I also use a different switch to turn on my dehumidifier when I go to bed at night, as well as when I leave. It also turns off when I arrive back home. This basically eliminates the tedious task of me having to manage my dehumidifier. Now, when it comes to lights, I've been using them in my office as well as my night lights, which also seconds as my alarm clock, which is cool. Rather than being awakened by a jarring alarm, I can set the smart light to gradually come on at a certain time, which is a lot more pleasant than waking up to those old school alarm clocks. If you're wondering how else I've been using all these smart home accessories, do check out my website in the tips and tricks and recipes section. I've got a lot of samples there. Also check out the videos on my website between the comparisons between all these different smart plugs as well as smart lights. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below if this video was helpful to you, considering getting your products through my links, as I'm not sponsored by Apple or any of these manufacturers. So it doesn't cost you any more when you go through my links, and I get a bit of commission, which supports me for all the future videos and accessories that I'm going to have to buy in the near future. Thanks for watching. Okay, buddy, we are done. Finito.